The topic of my presentation today is the secret to understanding the gold and silver markets. And I just hope I do a little sharper job than I did at the Heathrow Airport getting here. I needed some money to get the cab to get from the, to get from the airport to the Marriott Hotel where we're staying. So I pulled out a $100 bill and gave it to the exchange people, and I said, could you please give me in dollars or the equivalent to of $100 worth of Deutschmarks? They looked at me cross-eyed. Deutschmarks? Yeah, that doesn't work here as money anymore. I meant euros. So the point is, I said, oh my gosh, where's my head on that one? I was just thinking about Munich. It was also interesting to me that I thought, well, $100 was going to get me here, easily for a cab ride. Well, they only gave me, I haven't been here in a while, and they gave me 51 euros. I said, well, that'll be enough, same. And I got there, the cab ride was 53 bucks. I had to give the guy $10 tip. I had to go in and beg the people at the front desk to bail me out. It just shook me up because you're used to it. What the costs are doing. I mean, even at the hotel, I'll get into the presentation, like a hamburger for us is like $35. It's like, oh my gosh, talk about hyperinflation. So we're getting there. But anyway, it's great to be back in Munich. The last time I was here, the price of gold was $624, and obviously a lot has happened since then. And of course, the biggest thing is what the prices of gold and silver, what they've done. I thought I'd start off by just explaining a little bit about GATA. It was formed by Chris Powell, an editor of a daily newspaper, the Journal Enquirer in Manchester, Connecticut, in January of 1999 to expose the manipulation of the gold price, stopping the price from going above 290 bucks, 300 bucks. And then I heard other reports, and I said, this thing is rigged. It's being managed. And I got all ticked off and wrote a piece called Skandal Gold. And Chris, who had newspaper experience, said, well, geez, if what you're talking about is correct, it's a violation of antitrust policies. Let's do something about it. He said, if you put up 500 bucks, I'll put up 500 bucks. And somehow I got in, as James said, on CNBC for the first and last time in 12 years, because once they heard what I had to say, it became persona non grata, not only on CNBC, but the rest of the U.S. media. And then as time went on, we realized it was really much bigger, this whole scheme, than we thought. Not only was it some of the bullion banks, but it included the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and other central banks, such as the Bank of England. And that's where we came up with the name, the Gold Cartel. Now, there's a lot of evidence to prove the manipulation of the gold market. But if I might say, think of it as a murder trial, where you know somebody killed somebody. But the jury has to go through months of evidence and putting it all together and explaining it. And by the end, it's clear that the person murdered somebody. But it takes a great deal of time to do that. But the evidence, I said, is so blatant that that's what occurred. Well, we don't have 2 months to do that. So all I can say is, for those of you who would like more details, my colleague Chris Powell, who spoke at Olympia Park in November, has a piece at the GATA website, www.gata.org. Gold price suppression is public record and public policy, not conspiracy theory. So for those of you who want more detailed specifics, you can go and read what Chris had to say. But since I'm in Europe, I thought I would bring to your attention one of the events that really drew people to GATA, because while James realized we had something that was on target right away, many other people that are now with GATA looked at us with skeptical eyes, until the Bank of England decided to sell half their gold, or 400 tons, in May of 1999. And they did so in advance, telling everybody what they were going to do. And if you want to maximize your money in selling something, you don't tell people in advance what you're going to do, and then I think also take the lowest price. It was ridiculous. As James liked to say, can you imagine Warren Buffett going out and saying, I'm going to buy XYZ stock, and tell everybody in the world ahead of time? It just doesn't work that way. So that woke people up, and it's even more interesting to me because the day before, James said I write this daily commentary, here's what I wrote the day before this announcement. On May 6th of 1999, we know the squad, I talked in different anecdotal terms back then, we know the squad are all lining up to try and stifle a decent gold move to the upside. I thought James was, your memory get as old as I get, your memory gets a little bit goofy, and I thought that's what brought James in the camp. I forgot about that he knew all about us at the, from my appearance on CNBC. But he has been one of our staunchest supporters all these years, and a man who gave GATA credibility when it's hard to come by. And there also has been nobody more right over these past years than what the prices of gold and silver to do than James. So how about a big hand for him? Now I could go on and on about a bunch of stuff, but I'm going to get right to the point of this presentation, and that the key to really understanding what the prices of gold and silver have done and are going to do is to know what GATA knows. And that is to understand the ramifications of the gold price suppression scheme. The people that don't go there, quite frankly, don't know anything about the real gold market, and I'll get into this. It doesn't mean they know a lot of things, but the real key to understand what's happened and why we have nailed this market as well as anybody in the whole world for the past decade, and many of them have been totally offside, is worth getting into. And since I know many of you are here today looking for money-making opportunities, what I'm going to do is try to go back over time and get into some of the stuff that we said. So to build the confidence of what we said as we went along, geez, and if these guys have been that right, and here's some specific examples from here to now, it may give you more confidence about what we have to say for our predictions of what's coming in the future. And for us, it's all about being comfortable about understanding the gold and silver price suppression scheme. And this thing, ironically enough, we mentioned Frank Veneroso a couple times. It started with me before my website was started, or GATA started, with this book, the 1998 Gold Annual Gold Book that Frank Veneroso wrote. In it, he said, and just I'll read one paragraph, in Chapter 3, we discovered two absolutely crucial facts about the gold market. First, outstanding gold loans at perhaps 8,000 tons far exceed conservative consensus estimates. And second, the evidence builds that global gold demand and the deficit in the gold market is perhaps 600 tons higher than Gold Fields Mineral Services, the industry organization that's looked at, estimates. The bottom line is, way back then, Frank realized that the gold loans were much bigger than the establishment was willing to acknowledge. And what this meant, the demand was much greater than was being recognized by industry organizations. So all GATA did, once we got into this, our routine, is to take what Frank did and extrapolate it on the years to come as they've gone by. And the irony is, as many facts that we come up with, we can't get people in the mainstream world, I call it, or the mainstream gold world, what I call Planet Wall Street, to pay any attention to us. And there's a reason for that. We are taking on the richest and most powerful people in the world. The big banks, the big politicians, the big money, and the financial media and other people don't want to hear about it. They don't want to go against them. As James liked to say, you know, well, we spent some money at times regarding that ad. It also galls me a little bit, and it tweaks me a little bit, that, you know, we call all these crazy things conspiracy nuts. The establishment likes to marginalize people like us, and, you know, tinfoil hat people. And if you look at our track record, we have done things in the most mainstream of ways. I met with James Saxon, United States Congress, the head of the Joint Economic Committee. Met with the Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert. Met with Alabama Congressman Spencer Backus, who's now head of the Congressional Financial Service Committee, a very powerful committee. I went to see President Bush's best boyhood friend, who's a top politician in Austin, Texas. Gave me his private fax. We sent him a fax. Lawrence Lindsay, his economic advisor, got back to us, said he couldn't comment on other things because of a lawsuit. We've written all kinds of people in the most appropriate of ways. As James mentioned, we had those 3 international conferences, and we have another conference coming in London, the belly of the beast, the belly of the gold cartel beast. There's these invitations on this table here for any of you that might want to think about attending and get more information from the GATA site. And as mentioned earlier, we placed this $264,000 full-page color ad, which I think we can call up here, for those of you who can be able to see it. And it's okay. And here it is, and here it is here for those of you who see it over here. Now you would think, I mean, this is pretty establishing. You know, it's spent a lot of money, and as James mentioned, in this ad we talked about coming catastrophe and disaster as a result of the price suppression scheme, which was months ahead of the financial market collapse. We talked about $3,000 to $5,000 gold. Now, you would think at the time, we thought, geez, someone's going to say, why would you people spend all this money? Or as time goes by, this is exactly what happened. You think even today that anybody would give us any, we care about credit, but understanding of, geez, these guys were right. What did they know that other people didn't know? But to our astonishment, nothing. That's why it's such a pleasure to come here and have such a receptive audience, because in the United States, you've got to have to give tickets away to have people come see us. But hopefully after this conference in London, which is going to be a big, big deal, some of you heard of Jim Sinclair. He never speaks anyway. He's going to be there. It's going to be quite exciting. And at that conference, we're going to celebrate what happened at Gold Rush 21. And many of the speakers are going to be of the same. And we've got some big new names to be there. The price of gold back then was $436 per ounce. So maybe now we're getting into the hallelujah time I was talking about there. I also might like to add that one of President Putin's top economists, Andrei Bykov, came to the conference, came out of nowhere, said it was the finest conference he was ever at. At the time, gold was doing nothing. $436. 2 days later, the price exploded and it went up $300 an ounce in the following 9 months. And we know that while we're not allowed to be discussed much in the United States, we know that the Russians and Chinese followed us closely. Both James and I had been on 3 conference calls with the Chinese Investment Corporation, so they know what God is talking about. Back years ago, I used to say to somebody, okay, you got a policy, means you have to do something. Can't have a policy and do nothing. Would someone please tell me what the U.S. does to affect the strong dollar policy? I didn't get one, and I did it 100 times. I didn't get one person to tell me what it is. I raised my hand. What they did was the manipulation of the gold price. And where that comes from, it can be learned from his successor, Lawrence Summers, who wrote a paper at Harvard called Gibson's Paradox and the Gold Standard, in which he demonstrated the relationship between gold and interest rates. The bottom line is you keep gold suppressed and you can help keep interest rates lower than it would be, and it would make the dollar stronger, and so on. So a lot of, when you look into these details, it goes back to that murder kind of thing, it all fits together. And what's important, that was also mentioned earlier, is that the central banks, as a result of selling gold surreptitiously and lending gold out, don't have the 30,000 tons that you hear about all the time. People just sort of, oh, they got 30,000 tons. They're lucky if they have 12,000 tons. And a lot of this was corroborated years ago by the fine work that James Turk did, Frank Veneroso and Reg Howe, the GATA consultant, all came up with generally the same numbers. So we were working on a pretty sound foundation of what was going to happen. And that is the bad guys, as I call them, the gold cartel, was gradually going to run out of available central bank gold to keep their scheme going. In other words, they were going to run out of ammunition. And that's one of the reasons, again, that understanding that this was going to occur and that prices had to go up and way up is so important to know. Meanwhile, we've been criticized, some of you will know these people names, by many visible people in the mainstream gold world that have ridiculed us all this time. Many of you know of Kitco's John Nadler, who I call the nitwit. There's Jeff Christian of CPM Group, and Goldfield Mineral Services, I mentioned her, Paul Walker, have got it wrong for most of the way up. This is all, if you go back and look at their track record, what they said, they have been neutral and bearish most of the time. Now, to bring some facts, not so much to disparage them, although they would have no problem doing that to us, but to make a point of that why it's important to know what we know versus the people who criticize us. John Nadler, who called us the tinfoil brigade, has been looking for gold to collapse as long as I can remember. Those of you who follow him in Kitco know that very well. In 2009, he publicly stated that he expected the price of gold to fall to around $800 an ounce. I mean, how wrong can you get? I mean, that's not too sharp. At the Silver Summit, and I was there, in 2009, Jeff Christian stated the price of gold was going to average $941 an ounce for the next decade. It's the same Jeff Christian who called GATA a bunch of liars. I mean, you can't get wronger than that. Industry spokesman Paul Walker, who gets quoted all the time by the media, shouted out at the FT Gold Conference in Paris in 2000 that GATA were a bunch of fools. At the same time, he was encouraging the big mining giants Barrick Gold and Anglo Gold to hedge their gold forward prices, meaning to get protection in the futures market, again at $300 gold, when the price was below $300 an ounce. Well, all these years later, just a couple of years ago or something like this, Barrick covered their hedges at $1,000, nice going, and Anglo Gold covered their hedges just recently, or not too long ago, at $1,300 per ounce. So who were the fools? At the Denver Gold Group, the same Paul Walker predicted in 2008 the gold price would be between $700 and $1,000 per ounce in 2010. I mean, how wrong can you get? So, you know, you can go with the wacko people that put out this stuff, have been dead on all these years, or listen to the mainstream gold world that poo-poo us. And again, I'll go back to the same thing of what's important here. The mainstream gold world are working with the wrong supply-demand numbers. And the reason they're working with the wrong numbers is because they refuse to deal with the gold price suppression scheme. The silver situation is much more dramatic. What we do know is that since GATA's appearance in front of the CFTC, silver has traded like never before, and of course, especially the past 6 months, and then even more importantly, the past 3 months. So in terms of giving this comfort level, and we're moving on here, don't have too much more to go, I'd like to give you a recap, because right now everyone's the experts, but I'd like to say what GATA presented to a conference in Phoenix when the price was $32 in February. And this is what we said was coming. Thanks to the gold cartel, the price of silver has lagged many other commodity prices over recent years. Silver is relatively very cheap versus gold. The gold-silver ratio is falling rapidly, is likely to collapse in the months and years ahead as the price of silver soars. Remember a bit, and then I talked about, remember about working with the wrong-term numbers, the mainstream gold world. Well, Eric Sprott, at a conference in Vancouver, just before ours, said it stunned him when his people looked at the numbers of this CPM group that I mentioned earlier, and their whole they had the investment demand for, you're going to make a big deal of this. What was the investment demand for a whole year? And Eric said to his people, wait a second here. They penciled in this number for total investment, and we bought more, Sprott did, than they have for the whole world for 1 year. That's how wrong their numbers were in silver and other things. I mean, it's really staggering. Eric back then, the conference said he was looking for the gold-silver ratio to eventually go to 16-1. You know what it's done since then, and nobody's got a better track record, except for maybe James and Eric Sprott. Frank Veneroso at our May 10th, 2001 conference said the central banks would run out of gold between 7 and 10 years. December of 2009, exactly in the middle, 8.5 years, that's what happened. At the Gold Rush 21 conference, when the price of gold was $436, I began pounding the table that it would take $3,000 to $5,000 gold to clear the market. That may be way too low, but I'll stick with that. And I think when it comes to silver, I know James has some telephone book numbers, but I just call it, you can pick a number of silver and the upside. No one has been more right, again, as I mentioned a couple times, than James Turk in the markets. And initially, when he was back supporting us, that was most appreciated. Now, because of his price predictions, we're out here to support him and his outlook. So what goes around comes around. And finally, I'd like to say that I believe that there's going to be a fortune made in the years ahead in the gold-silver shares because of the leverage that you can get from them. It's an astounding and extraordinary opportunity. And what is going on now I've never seen before. While the Dow goes up every day, as you know, the PP every day. Doesn't matter what happens. The gold and silver shares, with gold and silver doing what they are, can't get out of their own way. Many of the smaller companies, the prices have collapsed. So what's going on? Well, there could be a number of things. One, you could say a lack of conviction. People are waiting for gold and silver to correct. The hedge funds are long certain of the gold, silver stocks, the ETFs, physical market, and short many of the other companies across the board. And I think most importantly, it's a government operation, not to be conspiratorial, but if you look at this price action, it's just ludicrous. It seems to me that they're so desperate of what's going on in gold and silver, they're trying to get people's spirits down by going after the shares because that's something they can do. Silver is hopeless. Gold they can do here and there, but all they can do is raid the market, and they keep getting their butts kicked in these recent raids because people are getting wise to them. So they're working over the shares. And the other reason, the Dow goes up every day, so why take the big risky gold silver shares? But because of that, I think you have a reverse bubble, and one of the biggest opportunities in market history. Instead of the gold and silver shares taking off, they've gone the other way. Adam Fleming talked about how little was, back in our conference, was invested in gold, silver, and the shares, and recently say now it's 1% and came up from 0.2%. And Eric Sprott brought to my attention, Bill, that's not because there's a lot of new money. It's because the price of gold and silver have gone up so much, the number has gone up. So still, especially in the United States, they can barely spell gold and silver yet. I think it's just starting to change, but they're not there yet. But there's going to be a psyche change. It's coming, sure as shooting. Timing's difficult because I would have thought it would have happened by now, but it hasn't. But that's going to make the move that much bigger. And as many of you that are in the markets know that the gold-silver sector is very tiny market cap compared to the rest of the investing universe. I mean, it's rinky-dink. When that psyche changes, think of it like a funnel. The money's going to come pouring in, and these stocks are going to go up faster than you can ever imagine. There's going to be many 10 and 20 baggers, 100%, 200, not 100%, 1,000%, 2,000%. It's going to be a sight to behold, and it will rival the mania we had on the internet, except I think this will be a real, at least for some time. So if I'm right, when that happens, and the gold and silver, of course, is going to keep going, great investments, maybe then we can big smile on our faces and go off in the sunset with those smiles. So with that, I want to thank you very much and see you again.